I'm Jodi Jackson Tucker, and in this second mother video, I'm joined by my daughter Mackenzie, who grew up in a multicultural family. And I thought we could talk for a few minutes about what that's like, what your kids might be experiencing, what others might experience through your family. So thanks, Kens, for taking on the race topic as well.
Absolutely.
So you have 5 siblings that are not Caucasian.
Correct.
There's also been foster relationships in our family from other cultures. And I know that that's probably shaped your life and kind of what that was like growing up in a family like that with 2 white parents, but kids from lots of different backgrounds. So let's just start off like, did you feel like the weird kid at school? Like, what was that like?
Well, so I first want to say I'm speaking from the perspective of the biological child
Right.
and the child who is the same skin tone as the parents.
Right.
And I just want to acknowledge that while I might have faced challenges because I have people of color in my family, those challenges are not even close to what you face if you are actually a person from a minority race or culture. So this will be my perspective, but I also think the perspective of my siblings and how that affected them will be so important. Watch those videos as well.
Yes.
But I will say for me, I did not feel self-conscious at
Really?
all. No, did not feel self-conscious. I did feel very protective. So it was very important to me that people did not make insensitive comments around my siblings or to my siblings. And I think I'm actually really grateful that I grew up mindful of that because I think it shaped who I brought into my life. Like, it caused me to be drawn to people who were thoughtful and open-minded and understood and respected differences in race or culture. Whereas if I had grown up in an entirely white family or an entirely white context, I might not have even thought about that as a trait in a friend.
Right.
Whereas then I realized, no, my friends definitely need to be respectful and tolerant because I'm incredibly protective of my siblings. I'm not bringing anybody around my family that has any sort of foul attitude about those topics. And so I think that was the biggest takeaway I had, as well as probably just a heightened sensitivity to the issues that you see on the news or discussed in culture that I might otherwise think that's a million miles away from me. How would I ever relate to that or connect to that? And instead it would be deeply personal. Like if I saw, it's still hard to even talk about, but if I saw like a young black man who was killed, in the news, that became personal. Like that could have been one of my siblings because there is, such a deeper human connection there. There aren't just statistics anymore. And so I think that those were the 2 areas where it brought a heightened sensitivity to my life.
It's interesting that you say that because years ago, now over 20 years ago, when I was doing research before adopting your first sibling of color, I read a study that said the only difference, or one of the major differences they found in white children who had siblings of color was that they were more likely to marry someone of another race, and they concluded that to be because they saw past race because they were in relationships with their siblings. So at the time I reflected on that and had to consider what that meant for me in my life. But I thought that was beautiful, and you brought home lots of kinds of boyfriends, but we don't have enough time for all of that. So that was definitely borne out in your life.
Okay, listen, to be fair, in my defense, I think that that's true, but for the positive. Like, I think you don't see culture and race as a barrier to the same extent. Like, I've already had siblings from another race, siblings from another culture. So when I meet someone with an accent or with a different skin tone, I'm not like, oh no, how am I going to communicate with this person? It's a very natural process to me that I already had to learn with them as far as just respecting differences and
Yeah.
enjoying the differences. Like,
Yeah.
not just tolerating them, but really, like, loving to learn about other cultures and experiences that people have in their own skin. And so, yes, it definitely has made my life colorful and diverse.
In a good way.
In a good way.
Yes. So, sometimes there's funny stories that happen in a multicultural family. Your sister, Agnes, has already shared some of those stories in her own personal videos, and we'll talk more with Agnes here and talk about some of those. But is there anything in particular that comes to mind where you felt sort of the joy of being a multicultural family or the humor of it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the funniest thing to me is so it's not atypical in African cultures when you are celebrating something to let out this really high-pitched like yip. And I could never make the sound, so I'm not going to try to imitate it. But one of my sisters in particular, if she is really overjoyed, still, like
It's not really a yip. It's quite
like,
longer
it's like,
than yip.
Yeah, it can add on. It can like, yeah.
Yeah, there
it can
you go.
build. It can start as a yip and then there's more.
She's also done that at the doctor's office, but that's my story, not your story.
Right. So I love like those moments to me, like when they embrace who they are,
Yes.
which is fully American and fully African, and allowing themselves to express that is so fun to be a part of, because I get to see a side of life I would never see otherwise.
Right.
And I have these incredible memories of like Christmas morning, my siblings opening presents and like letting out this incredible cry that I'm like, I never imagined that this is what my Christmas morning would sound like. But I love it. Yeah. So I think like those things are really sweet and like memories that I cherish and that I feel like are so unique.
Oh, I love that. What about something hard? Has there been a situation with a friend or at school? You and Olivia, who's mixed race, you went through elementary school and high school together, or bringing home boyfriends, anything like that that's been challenging?
Yeah, I think the painful thing is when there's someone that you really love who shows their true colors when it comes to our family dynamic. Because there can be people who you've never heard them say something rude or cruel or whatever, and then you're in a situation where it comes up that you have a multiracial, multi-ethnic family, or maybe they're interacting with one of your family members and there's something that rubs you the wrong way, whether it's that they're talking down to them or they make very insensitive questions. Now I'm not saying don't be curious, but I think a person knows when their question is sensitive or not sensitive. So I think those moments hurt when you're like, man, I really liked and trusted this person and I saw their true colors when they made that remark about my family, or when they were willing to say or do the things that they did. So it does weed people out. Especially, we're lucky to live in kind of a pretty diverse urban area. Right. But if you're a family watching that you know your neighborhood, your local school is mostly white, you're going to see a lot of people's true colors. And I would say pray for grace in your heart, but also be protective. Like, be committed to diversity in whatever way that you can find it. Even if it means you have to drive further to church, even if it means signing up for a different school district. Don't let your child grow up feeling alone, because their experience in their race will affect them whether they have white parents or not. So, yeah.
That's good. That's super helpful. We'll talk a lot more about this with your siblings. I'll ask them what it's like having a white sister. So get ready.
Perspective, yes.
But I appreciate you sharing about that today.
Thank you. Leave questions in the comments if you have follow-up questions.
Yes, and thank you for being part of these Second Mother videos.
Thanks for
I really
having
love
me.
it.
Oh, so cute.
And for you who's watching, don't forget that love plus time equals victory. Hang in there. I'm praying for you.